Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Pastor Nick Jones. I pastor here in the Oregon Conference, and we are glad that you are here, whether you're in the Oregon Conference or around the world. We are super happy that you are here joining us this afternoon. Today, we are going to have Dr. Tom Evans speak to us, a topic called Red Carpet Service, dealing with practical ways in which you can reach out and welcome people into your church. So we're looking forward to Dr. Tom Evans in his presentation. Dr. Tom Evans has served as the Outreach Director for the Oregon Conference for several years, and he has just taken a call to work in Children's International Impact International, headquartered in Ooltewah, Tennessee. We are sure going to miss him, but we're glad that he is taking some time to move up and share more of his skills with the world. So let us join Dr. Tom Evans in his presentation, Red Carpet Service.
Welcome, Oregon Conference family. So glad you've joined for this presentation, Red Carpet Service. Have you ever experienced red carpet service? How did it make you feel? I know when I've experienced it, it's something to talk about. Well, I want to share with you some of my experiences as well as some biblical principles in this presentation. I remember being at Andrews University, and one day as I was driving home, I noticed a bus had pulled in, and on the side of it, it said, Red Carpet. What kind of service would that be like? I bet it would be quite different than this particular bus, right? We want some things, but often what is delivered can be something quite different. I mean, imagine staying at a resort like this. It would be quite an incredible experience, unless, of course, there was a tsunami. But if you take a look at this is often what we deliver. Now, I wonder if any of you, like me, have ever stayed at a motel. I know I stayed at a moel one time. That's where the T was missing. And it was a mistake I'll never forget, because I had company in bed that evening of the insect variety. Near my home, when I was living in Michigan again, there was a Comfort Suites, but they decided to change their name to Comfort Sites. And I drove through a couple days later, and they'd become Comfort Suits. So I think basically all the letters are going out, and they need to just change them all. This is what we want. Doesn't this look like a nice romantic place to have a dinner? But sometimes this is what we deliver. Somebody here got very creative with the ketchup and the mustard. This may be what we want, or know what we deliver here, the Gold Corral. Some of you have been to the Golden Corral before, and again, there's all sorts of challenges that we can run into if we show up at places like this. Usually something else isn't quite right as well. Nice vehicle here on a mountain road, what we want, and this can be what we deliver. But the same thing is true when it comes to church. We can look at a beautiful setting like this, and you can see all the aesthetics around are so nice. And we plan a beautiful worship service, but sometimes this is what we deliver. Now, the idea of red carpet treatment comes from a very interesting experience that took place in which country, would you guess? I think many of us would guess that red carpet service comes from probably Britain, right? Not so. It actually originated in America from a train called the 20th Century Limited. This train was known for its style as well as its speed, and passengers walked onto the train, onto plush crimson carpet that was rolled out in New York. Well, they would put that roll of carpet up on the train, they would go to Chicago, and then they would roll it out so the passengers could walk off the train again on red carpet. And thus was born the concept of red carpet service. Who in the world today receives red carpet service? Well, we certainly can think of dignitaries, presidents, famous people, movie actresses and actors. And I really want us to reflect on this for a moment, because as we think about our own churches and we think about this concept of red carpet service, I want to ask you a question. And I really want you to not be dismissive with this question. I want you to seriously reflect on it. If William and Kate were scheduled to visit your church this next Sabbath, what would you do differently? Now, you would know that they have a couple of children, and so you would want to make sure that you're prepared for their children. How would you greet them as they arrived in the parking lot, as they walked in the front door? How would you orient them to your facility? What would you be talking about during your Sabbath school? Again, all of a sudden we have heightened awareness because we have special guests among us. But don't we all worship the King of the universe? Shouldn't our worship be expressed in a way that demonstrates the very best that we have to give? I had an experience in England that illustrates these two different kinds of experiences that we can go through. I was there as a guest speaker, had a couple of friends that traveled with me. Here we are pictured at Stonehenge. But this was our hotel that we stayed at. It was called Premier Inn. Now, Premier Inns, they're not flash on the outside, but they're quite nice inside. And so this was a really good accommodation that we're going to be staying in. And during part of our trip, part of our visit, we would stay in Reading, and then we would move over to Watford. So same hotel chain, two different locations. Well, at the first hotel, we had quite an amazing experience. I discovered that Premier Inn is well known for breakfast. They serve breakfast, I would say, that is fit for a king. So here I have some porridge, as they would say there, with some, do you know what kind of berries those are on top of the porridge? There's some that you would recognize there, probably some blackberries and so on, but there's also currants, a couple of different kinds of currants. Well, that wasn't all that was there for breakfast. In fact, as you see here, I had some steamed tomatoes and mushroom. Again, it was amazing, but breakfast was not yet finished. Then came the veggie sausages. What hotel serves you veggie sausages? Now, I have to say, I don't think I ate quite all of these, but it was an amazing experience. In fact, the two guys that I went with, they were so excited we could hardly wait for breakfast the next morning. We eat enough at breakfast to last practically the whole day. So when we switched hotels, we had an expectation. It's the same hotel, uses the same logo, the same welcome booklet, the same purple theme, the same room keys, the same breakfast price, and even the same breakfast items were advertised. But we had two very different experiences. The difference was in the details. Now, at the first hotel, I talked about that full English breakfast that we had. Everything was fresh and available. At the second hotel, they were out of eggs and mushrooms. At the first hotel, the crumpets, this nice British pastry, was soft, and you could put it in the toaster and make it hard if you wanted. The second one, they were hard, and I don't think there's any way you could change that. Perfectly done veggie sausages. I think the ones at the second hotel had around the previous morning or two. Soy milk, this was an interesting one. The hotel advertised soy milk being available. At the first hotel, they didn't have it, but when I asked for it, they had it there for me ready the next morning. At the second hotel, they said, "Sir, we're so sorry. We don't get many requests. We're unable to respond to your request for that." A large variety, again, about half the options. And our whole attitude shifted. I went to breakfast one morning, and the other guys didn't show up. So I went back to the rooms. I said, "Guys, where were you? You missed breakfast." "I think we'll skip breakfast today." Wow, what a difference. And I found when it comes to church, the same can be true. We can have the same denomination, but very different experiences. We, after all, use the same logo. We have the same doctrines, the same church manual, the same prophetic message, the same day of worship, the same Advent hope. But there can be a real difference when it comes to the details. I want to just touch on this concept of excellence from a biblical perspective just for a moment here. Where does the concept of excellence begin in Scripture? It actually begins at creation. God saw all that he had made, and it was what? It was excellent. It was very good. And there was evening and morning the sixth day. Now, in the book of Haggai, God rebukes the returning exiles and is very specific in his rebuke. He says, "Give careful thought to your ways. You planted much, but you harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but you're not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it." Now, I felt like that at different times in my life, and perhaps you can relate to that one. But then the verse continues, "You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away." Why, declares the Lord Almighty? "Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with your own house." What a rebuke. We can be so busy with our own homes, with our jobs, and doing the best we can, doing these things with excellence. And then it just kind of disappears or drops away when it comes to God's house and God's work. That was happening in the Old Testament. And in fact, You can see this poor lamb here has too many legs, and these were the kind of sheep that were being offered to God, those that were injured and lame, diseased. And God says, when you bring those animals and offer them as sacrifices, should I accept them from your hands, says the Lord? Notice the response. Cursed is the cheat who has an acceptable male in the flock and vows to give it, but then sacrifices a blemished animal to the Lord. For I'm a great king, says the Lord Almighty, and my name is to be feared among the nations. Well, the Old Testament, of course, had the sacrificial system, and we can see from these verses that it's very clear that God expected the best offering. What happens when it comes to the New Testament? What is that sacrifice in the New Testament era? You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house, into a royal priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Somehow we as human beings, we as individuals, are the ones that are bringing the worship, the sacrifice to God. Therefore, I urge you, this is Romans 12:1, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. So our human sacrifice, is it the best quality when it comes to preparing for the Sabbath, to family devotions, to personal devotions, to family time with our spouse and children, our entertainment, our use of free time, giving to God's work, our use of money, of health? What area would God be calling you to raise the quality of your sacrifice in? Are we bringing God what's best? Or can what we offer to God personally or as a church ever be described with these words? The leftovers, second rate, substandard, inferior, poor quality, shoddy, shabby, careless, lackadaisical, and here's a couple good Australian ones. It's a bit dodgy or shonky. Or can we describe with these words? Excellent, first rate, first class, superior. Here's another Aussie one. Good on you, mate. Or Bob's your uncle. Or bonza. Outstanding, exceptional, top-notch, superb quality. All those words to say red carpet service. Here's the key thought. Excellence honors God and inspires people. Let's capture that again. Excellence honors God and inspires people. I love the way that Joel Mabee says this in his book, Love Works. The enthusiasm of the guest experience can never rise any higher than the enthusiasm of your own employees. Now I have a very special picture here. These are two boys that we're adopting from an orphanage in Latvia. And in this particular occasion, we just picked them up from Chicago, and because Costco was a ways from where we lived at the time, we stopped by Costco on the way home. As you can see here, the lady that was checking us out recognized that both boys were a little bit curious about how groceries were scanned and wanted to participate. So she just handed the scanner right to the older boy and let him scan all our groceries for us. He had an amazing experience. Guess what? He could hardly wait to go to Costco again. I was so impressed that I wrote an appreciation note and sent this picture along with it. It was actually published in the Costco newsletter. So it's amazing the experience you can have when somebody gives you red carpet service. How does this concept, this quote, apply to the church? As we think about guests that come to church, visitors, what it's saying here is the enthusiasm of a visitor to our church can never be higher than the enthusiasm of our own members, than your enthusiasm. That's quite a statement, isn't it? In fact, Jesus understood this principle well and shared this principle very clearly. For out of the fullness, the overflow, the superabundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. We can't help but talk about the things that we're excited about. As I mentioned, we're adopting a couple of boys from the country of Latvia. In fact, we'll be traveling there just prior to camp meeting. And by the time you view this, our boys should be home with us. But this is the city of Riga, Latvia. And if you go to Riga, there is a place that you must visit. And again, this illustrates the point of word of mouth and how powerful that is. It's a place called Lido. Lido is an amazing buffet. that, I try to take pictures of the buffet and they stop me from doing it, but it is an experience worth having. And once you've had it, you want to share it with other people and tell them about it. So we can hardly wait. I'm recording prior to going. We can hardly wait to go to Latvia and experience Lido again. I just hope I don't experience it too many times, or that I make sure that I control my portions, because it is absolutely amazing. I had a similar experience going to Walla Walla Valley Academy in Walla Walla. There's a famous place, and because that's near here, many of you would be familiar with it, called Iceberg. Now, Iceberg is not on a main road in Walla Walla. And in fact, I don't know that they do any advertising. But because of word of mouth, people are lined up at lunchtime and dinner time to get their famous burgers, their onion rings, and their 37 different flavors of shakes. Word of mouth growth is what Iceberg is all about. Also there nearby, I remember during high school that students would make donut runs to a place called Rogers Bakery. They were famous for two kinds of donuts. One of them pictured here is maple bars, and the other one would be apple fritters. And still today, if I go to Walla Walla, I'll want to stop in at Rogers Bakery. My dad even sent me some for Christmas one time. But all of this makes me ask the question, we recognize that when we enjoy a restaurant, we enjoy a place in nature, we enjoy a particular experience that we have, we talk about it, right? We share it with others. But what if God's church grew by word of mouth? Did you know that's what happened in the New Testament? What exceptional experience takes place in your church that people leave talking about? How could you identify a standout experience that will create enthusiasm for both members and guests? I want to share a few of those things that I've noticed in visiting churches all around the world. But let's take a look at what the New Testament says about excellence, particularly when it comes to worship and to church. 1 Corinthians 14, verse 12. Even so you, since you are zealous for spiritual gifts, let it be for the edification of the church that you seek to excel. Why do we want to do things well? Why do we want to do things with excellence? Because that helps God's church grow. Now I want to give you a little bit of a case study, and hopefully this isn't too familiar to your own local church, but I want us to reflect on this for a moment. This is called the Holy Huddle. The members enthusiastically tell you how friendly their church is. However, you begin to notice that other than the formal greeting at the door, visitors are pretty much ignored. It seems that members are friendly among themselves. What are 3 steps you can take to become a visitor-friendly church? So this is just one sample, one exercise that we can look at, but we want to be other-focused. We want to think about the experience that a guest will have. We want to make sure that that guest will have a red carpet experience when they come to our church. You see, the difference between an average church and a church of excellence is attention to little details. So what are some of the little details that a church should pay attention to? I want to give you another case study here. A new family shows up to church, a husband and wife, and 2.3 children. Why 0.3 children? Because she's pregnant. What are the 3 most important places in the church for this family? What do you think? I want you to reflect on that for a moment. If you're watching this online, perhaps you can put in the chat where you think the 3 most important places in the church are for these individuals. But just in case you're waiting for an answer, I probably should give you one. One is, of course, the women's restroom. Why? Perhaps this mother has children that have diapers or nappies, depending where you're from, that need to be changed. Another one is most certainly the children's classrooms. What kind of education, what kind of experience will the children have? In fact, it's very clear that when children have an amazing experience at church, guess what? They tell their parents. What does that do? The parents are excited to bring their kids back again the next week. Another very important location in the church is the foyer, because that's the place where people can mingle and meet one another. I was visiting a church in another state. This is definitely not Oregon. This would never happen in Oregon, okay? But I want to show you this. Check it out. This bathroom had an out of order sign on the sink because it said there were some leaks. And next to it was a urinal that was being redirected. The water's being redirected so that it wouldn't leak on the floor. Creative, but probably not quite red carpet service. So what are some of those little details? What's the experience in the parking lot? I visited a church in Toronto one time where they had vests on, and as you drove into the parking lot, they were waving and helping you find a place to park. And it was just such a warm first welcome to that church. What about when it comes to greeting? How are we greeting our guests? Are we making them go sign a guest book? Are we visiting with them, showing ourselves friendly, giving them a tour of the church, an orientation, maybe even taking them personally to show them where they can go and where lunch will be? Are we giving them a gift bag, perhaps? There's all sorts of things that can happen to make that a red carpet experience. What I'd like for you to do as you take a look at this list is actually take a picture of the screen here and take this list to your church board. And as you sit down as a church board, begin to work through these items and just simply ask this question. What would it look like to take this particular area to the next level? You know, I've never gotten so excited about a restroom as I did about a restroom at a restaurant in Shipshewana, Indiana. In fact, whenever we would have guests come and visit us at Andrews University, we would take them to the Amish community in Shipshewana, and we would stop by so they could see the restrooms, the fresh flowers, the decorations, and it was an amazing experience. Simple things, little things, but things that made a big difference and invite you to come back. Fellowship meals, of course, coming out of COVID now, it's an opportunity to do those in a different way. I really encourage you to have teams. Maybe you have a theme, like a Mexican theme one month or an Italian theme the next month, or maybe it's a haystack per week. We obviously want to have potlucks, fellowship meals every week, and so on. But this church right here discovered that I had a list when I worked in Texas of the top 5 best potlucks in all of Texas. Now, Texans know how to cook, right? I was born there, but I never really had a list, a written list, but it was more of one, these are potlucks you definitely want to make, and these are ones you might want to miss. So in any case, this church wanted to make sure that they were in the top 5, and they advertised that they had the best potluck in town. I'm not sure it's the best one in the conference, but it was quite good. And you can see here something that's very important. You see the burners underneath the food. In fact, the Bible has something to say about this. It says if something's lukewarm, it should be spewed out of our mouths. So what I want to encourage you to do, if food is supposed to be hot, serve it hot. All right? And that makes a big difference. But notice what you have here. You have individuals that are serving the food. You can see they're dressed well and they have smiles on their faces. This guy was coming around to see if anybody wanted seconds. There was an abundance of tasty and healthy food. This same church, I noticed something. They had a midweek women's ministry meeting, or this might have even been right after church, but somebody had taken a photo of it. Can you imagine if an individual's been assigned, they're in charge of women's ministry, and they're trying to generate some interest, and so they gather a meeting. Well, we have plenty of meetings in the church without food. I don't think we probably should, but we do. But in this particular case, you know, somebody could bring a couple jugs of juice and maybe a bag of cookies and put them out on the counter for people to enjoy. But not at this church. Take a look at how they had a women's ministry meeting there. Doesn't that look amazing? Now, I expect if you're a woman that's been asked to join this meeting and you walk into the room that you would immediately think, this is something that I want to be a part of. This church did the same thing when it came to music and singing and praise teams. Notice this quote. Organize a company of who? The best singers, whose voices can lead the congregation, and let all who will unite with them. Now, this is still talking about the best singers. It says they should do what? Devote some time to practice. Why? That they may employ this talent to the glory of God. Now, I want you to take a look at the praise team from this particular church. Do you think they practiced before they got up to lead the congregation worship? They even talked about what they were going to wear. And you can see here the beautiful setting that this church worshiped in at the time I took these photos. I want to just share with you some top 5 red carpet awards. These are experiences I've had different places in the world. Oregon's included here, so that's good news. But just want to share those with you. And there's a number that I don't mention here that have been amazing experiences. But these are things that stand out. And first one here, countdown is number 5. And that's a cowboy church, hugs and a loaf of bread. You cannot get into this cowboy church in Texas without a hug. In fact, if you have a tie on, they have some scissors ready to cut the tie off. No, they definitely want to make sure that everybody feels welcome, even dressed like a cowboy. So children come down the aisles as part of the worship service during the offering to hand guests a loaf of homemade bread. and that bread tastes great. So what happens? They announce from the front, if you're a guest here with us today, just raise your hand up, and we have some children coming by. They're going to give you a loaf of bread. So who do you know to be especially friendly with after church? Anybody packing a loaf of bread. Those individuals will leave thinking, man, this is such a friendly church. I want to come back again. Just a great experience. And a number of churches in Texas, after being inspired by this one, started doing a baked loaf of bread. It's important you put the ingredients because many people have allergies. The next one here I have is a 5B, and this is an entry from Salem, Oregon, Nueva Vida. And when I was there, it was amazing, these specialty juices that they prepare. You can see that these absolutely look amazing. If you're near Salem, you may want to show up during their potluck and give it a try and maybe get that recipe so you can try it in your church. Number 4 here, Raymond Terrace Baptisms and their breakfast and lunch. This is absolutely an amazing church. Their average natural church development score is 80, if any of you are familiar with that particular tool that assesses church health. But they make a big deal of baptisms. This particular individual had come from being tormented by demons and having a lot of demonic materials that actually he asked for the pastor to burn there in the woods. The pastor burned those, and I remembered his baptism. He had some family members wondering what happened to his books, and I didn't have the heart to tell them that they were no longer available. I'll leave that to him. But you can see the celebration that's happening there is the person that had Bible studies and the 2 young ladies that went to his door and knocked on his door as colporteurs. They're there participating in his baptism. Here's another one that's taking place out at the ocean. Here's another one again. And you see the joy and enthusiasm surrounding these baptisms. And everybody who's baptized gets a special gift. Take a look at that. And they're customized based on interests that that particular individual has. Well, I mentioned they do a breakfast there. In fact, breakfast and lunch every week. And that's where I rolled out my vegan banana carob waffle recipe. This is actually on the website of Max Harvest Church, but you may want to snap a picture here as well. But this waffle recipe, these waffles are a magnet for church growth. I want to encourage you to give them a try. But it's wonderful when people can fellowship around food and build community that way. In fact, fellowship is spiritual. Number 3 countdown here, Avondale College First Impressions Team. So Avondale College, of course, is in Australia. And if you were to drive up to church there, you would see people holding brightly colored signs, invest, welcoming people as they come with just beautiful message. You belong here. So glad you're here. How'd you like to see a sign that says, you look amazing? Isn't that cool? And then that's one of the signs right here. And then you have a couple children helping out here. Have a good Sabbath. Have a great week. Again, just rolling out that red carpet to guests as they come in. I have another one that's just around the corner there from Avondale College, and that's the Gateway Church. And they have a hot breakfast every week, and you can just see the server that's there. And what I want you to really see about this, they knew I was coming as a guest, so they made me some dairy-free dessert. But check out how dynamic this fellowship is. Now, this obviously was before COVID, but we're going to get back to this again. And you can see that gathering around food for breakfast there, how people showed up, and they would move from there into church and Sabbath school, and it just was a powerful experience. Number 2 here comes from Texas again. This is San Antonio Philam Church, their music ministry. They actually use evangelism funds to purchase musical instruments, and then they provide free music lessons to any teenager who wants to learn to play. And so you can see they have a whole ensemble there of teenagers playing these musical instruments. It's beautiful music, and it's a great way to keep youth engaged in the church. Number 1 winner right here is South Tulsa Adventist Fellowship's Parking Lot Golf Cart Ministry. Some of you have noticed that Pioneer Memorial Church at Andrews University does this. South Tulsa was doing it before they were. And in fact, I went to visit the church, and I purposely went early and parked a long way away because I want to have the full Sabbath morning experience of being picked up on a golf cart. Now you say, we have a small parking lot. That doesn't fit. But what about umbrellas when it rains? It rains a lot in Oregon. What if you had an umbrella that had the logo of the church on it and your church's name, and you had somebody coming out to greet? I just was in Tennessee at Collegedale Community Church, and a young man came out with an umbrella to meet us and walked us to the door. So there's simple things that can be done. We're only limited by our creative thinking. And so I really want to challenge you to think about each of these areas and ask again that question, what would it take to move that to the next level? Well, there's something beyond red carpet as we're wrapping up here. Something beyond red carpet is called purple carpet. Now, when the Opera House was built in Sydney, Australia, red carpet was not good enough. It had to be purple carpet. And I had such an experience one time that has always stuck in my mind, and particularly in the mind of my wife. I was speaking for a week for camp meeting at Manitoba, Saskatchewan, conference. And I called my wife, and she said, Tom, I guess you know about the flowers that I received today. And I'm thinking, who is sending my wife flowers while I'm out of town? Well, she said, maybe I should share with you what the note says. And basically, she shared that this conference sent her flowers thanking her for sharing my time with them and just appreciating the sacrifice she made for me to be away during that period of time. I thought, wow, my wife will let me go speak for that conference anytime again. That's purple carpet treatment. So let's take a look at some principles of how we raise the quality in our church or our church plant, and we'll wrap with this. First of all, quality must be deliberate. There needs to be intentionality. If you listen to this presentation and said, you know what, that sounds like a really good idea, guess what? It's going to go nowhere. We need to become intentional and make a plan in order to be effective and in order to raise the level and the level of quality in our churches. The second one here is quality is required at all levels. There needs to be broad-based commitment. We can do a really great job greeting somebody, but then if they walk into restrooms that are smelly and disorderly, that might not be the same great experience. All of that great experience they had coming in may be forgotten for other experiences that they have. Third one here is you must practice what you'll deliver. This can be true about music. It can be true about communion. It can be true about our preaching. Whatever we do, if it's worth doing well, we need to be practicing it before we do it. Fourth one here, this is a tough one for some individuals, but we need to be self-critical and welcome feedback. One of the ways we can do that is after we've had an event, say, how can we do it? What do we want to remember that we did well? What do we want to make sure that we continue to do? And what could we do next time to make it even better? It's just a great attitude to have, an attitude of a lifelong learner, always wanting to improve. Not that we should be somebody who's never satisfied. We should celebrate successes, celebrate when things go well. But we also need to analyze and be able to look at it and say, okay, what made that go so well? What do we make sure we capture? And also, what can we do next time to go to the next level? You see, the difference between an average church and a church of excellence is attention to little details. Well, I hope your church will be one of those that takes a look at this presentation and says, okay, what will it look like for us to roll out the red carpet? How will we do things differently so we can take things to the next level? Because I believe as we do, this will be one of the keys to seeing our churches grow by word of mouth. May God bless you.
I'm here with Dr. Evans, who is here live. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. What a wonderful presentation that we've had on red carpet service. You know, just a few weeks ago, I was able to go to Disney World, and we went to dinner at one of the restaurants that were there. And it was amazing that even though we weren't dressed for a high-class meal, we were treated as if we were high-class people. The waiter was there anticipating our needs. When we were just getting low on a drink, another cup arrived. And receiving red carpet service is something that is very rewarding and honoring. And we went away from this meal feeling good about ourselves and about the service that we received. So it's really neat to have this opportunity to kind of look at our churches and try and provide red carpet service for those who attend.
Sure.
And guests. So we do have some questions.
Okay.
You know, there were a lot of people who were watching and had quite a few questions. One of the ones that really hit me was this phrase: if William and Kate were to visit to our church today, what would we do different? You started out that way. But what ways can we keep a question like that in front of our minds each week? Because things tend to slip. You know, we get used to our surroundings. We are used to going to church week after week. We see everything. We get used to it. But how can we keep that really in the forefront of our minds.
Yeah, I like that. Today, Rob, on our team, we were talking. He said maybe we should just have a cutout of William and Kate there in the church. But no, seriously, I think if you have a child or a grandchild who is not involved in church, who have left the church, who are perhaps even far from God, think about the kind of church that you want them to go back to. And if we have that kind of thought in our mind, it will cause us personally to take an interest, to take initiative in making sure that everyone that comes, everyone we come in contact with that comes to church receives some kind of red carpet treatment.
Right. So helping taking it on personally and looking at how do we want my kids or children or grandchildren, how do I want them to experience church?
Yeah, and I remember that in a very real way. I invited someone as a speaker when I was in Australia, and they were so excited because their daughter was actually going to church the weekend that they were away, and he was so glad for the church that she selected to go to, because they knew that she'd be treated well. She was going to arrive looking a little bit different than people would have expected, and being involved in things that people would not have been anticipating. And somebody actually tracked her down to the parking lot even as she was leaving, just to make sure that she knew how special it was that she'd come to church.
Wow, that's great. Now, another question that came up talking about the details and this red carpet treatment is, someone asked, shouldn't we strive to give everyone the red carpet treatment, not just guests?
Sure. But I think we had that illustration of the holy huddle. Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy for us to settle into what feels good, normal, natural for us, and we can, without even realizing it almost, ignore those guests or visitors. I remember when I was a youth pastor years ago, we were having a skiing event at the river, and this particular new girl showed up, and she nobody was being friendly with her. Nobody was even talking with her, and I was like, oh no, we want to capture every new person that comes along, right? And then she got out and started skiing, and she obviously knew what she was doing. Mm-hmm. And so as soon as she came back in, everybody started to talk with her. But I thought, my goodness, we really should be friendly from the first moment. And so I'd say, yes, of course we should treat everyone well. We're all sons and daughters of the King, right? But there's also that tendency to be comfortable with those that we know and to be friendly with the same people all the time, because it feels good and it feels natural. And so this is really a challenge to go outside of our comfort zone and be looking for those that need that extra welcome in order to feel like they're part of the family.
So creating a culture of welcome and friendliness, not only for those in the church, but for those who are attending, or guests that are coming. Yeah,
and it's like that cowboy church that gave the loaf of bread to the guest. That was a note to the members to say, okay, this person's somebody who's a guest. Let's all make sure that they feel extra welcomed. Right. I remember when I was a teenager, this was a church, I think it was Ooltewah, Washington, if I remember correctly, and I know nothing about that church now, but as a teenage boy, for us to get invited to 3 different homes that had teenage girls, man, that's a church I want to go to. So it's that kind of friendliness, and I even found having teenagers that somebody who has teenagers is the one that invites. Right. It helps the kids feel comfortable and excited, and so again, we need to think about who's visiting. I'll mention one group in particular: single moms. The person that makes a single mom feel the most comfortable is an elderly or retired woman that can be kind of a grandma figure for them and their kids. So a mother figure for the single mom and a grandmother figure for the kids is simply a way. An individual like that is very uncomfortable when they first arrive in a church, wondering how they're going to be received, wondering they're going to be able to manage their kids. Yeah. And for us to be able to, and we need to remember in churches outside of the Adventist system, they have programs for the kids during the church service. We don't do that, but what are we actually doing to help parents to come alongside them, to support them during the worship experience? That is what will cause them to want to come back. When children have an amazing experience, the parents want to come back as well. Right, because the children want to come back, and they're like, hey, let's go. They're going to be begging to come back. Yeah.
One of the things that you also said is excellence honors God and inspires people. Excellence is something that we strive for when we do church and when we reach out to people. But does excellence equate to high church, or can excellence work with a more laid-back church?
Excellence applies to relationships, right? And so relationships are fluid, they're flexible. One of the things I'd like to say is that fellowship is spiritual. And so, sometimes with high church, we tend to usher people out, and there's not that relational connectivity. And so I think there needs to be a switch. I think the whole model of fellowship and relational vitality as a way to structure church is super important. And I always say, let's look for as many opportunities as possible for connections to take place. Right. And so if there's a longer break between Sabbath school and church where people can connect and visit, I think all of those things lend themselves to excellence in relationships. And that's going to feel very different than an excellence that's a well-polished musical piece, which is also very nice and very inspiring. Right. But people are going to come back because of relationships more so than because it was an excellent musical piece. You can hear something better tuning in on YouTube somewhere. Sure. So we've all realized that with COVID, we're tuning into church services many times that are just so much better than the ones that we usually go to. Better sermons, better music, all that. So it's not just about the quality of those things, but more so even about the quality of relationships that are taking place.
So the excellence is the idea of being excellent in relationship building, more so than the excellence in how the church service flows.
I think it's a both and. I remember one thing that we did when I was pastor in North Dallas is we added a worship coordinator. And that person made sure that everybody was on time, that everybody's ready, and they knew when they were going on, and that we had a prayer before we went on. And just we would plan the worship services 3 months in advance. And so we would have pretty much every detail 3 months in advance. We'd meet every month. We'd be planning 3 months ahead. Major events, annual events, we would plan a year ahead. And just that extra attention to detail raised the level of the quality of what was delivered. And so people valued that more. You can have a theme when you plan ahead. The children's story can tie in, and the music can tie in, and the sermon can tie in. But that means, honestly, pastors, we have to be organized too, right? Right. We need to know if we're doing a series, what we're going to be preaching on 3 months in advance. Right. And that's a good discipline for us as well, rather than that Friday night, what am I going to preach on tomorrow? So, and our members value that. Yeah. When they can look and say, hey, we have a plan, we're headed somewhere. We can have a themes that we're working on different parts of the year. One of my friends, Gary Blanchard, is General Conference Youth Director. It was very good. He would invite me to come preach at his church, but he said, this is what your topic is for this particular Sabbath. Yeah. And it challenged me to have to prepare a new sermon. Right. But, it was still, it showed that there's intentionality that's taking place. And every church that I was acquainted with that he pastored went from, below average health to excellent health. Wow. Through intentionality like that.
Excellent. Excellence in intentionality in building relationships. Yeah, very good. So, our churches, a lot of churches here in Oregon and around the world are small. And so you have a small group of people that are doing a lot of different things. And many of them are starting, maybe feeling burnout or reaching burnout. And so it could feel like this is just an add-on to what they're doing. So how do you do red carpet service when volunteers are in that space of they're stressed, they're burnt out, they're already doing a lot? How does this function?
Burnout in the church context primarily is caused by three things. One is a lack of input, where somebody's making decisions for you, and you don't have any ownership of the direction things are going. So basically you show up to do what you're supposed to do, and you've not had any opportunity to create and design and be a part of owning what that's like. And so having those dialogues with the key players that are involved in every aspect. What could we do? What could this look like? How should we do this? How do you want to do this? If you were just turned loose to just create this, what would you do? Right. There's a sense of joy that comes out of being able to own it and create it. The other one is a lack of results. If week after week you're doing ministry and putting in the time, and you never hear any stories of lives being changed, of new people coming to church, of God doing miracles in people's lives because of what what all that work that you're doing, right? As soon as you know that what you're doing is making a difference for God, there's an energy that comes to that. And so I think one of the key roles of church leaders is to communicate to individuals that are serving about, specifically what they're doing and how it's making a difference. Not just saying, oh, you're making a difference, but to say specifically, I saw you do this, and this is how it made a difference. Right. And then the third area is working outside of your area of giftedness for an extended period of time. That will cause burnout. So it's very important that what we're doing aligns with our passions and our gifts. If you have all three of those, if you have input, participation, if you have if you're seeing results change lives, and you're working in the area of giftedness, my hunch is you're not burned out.
Right. It reminds me of Andy Stanley, who talks a lot about vision and mission, and how vision and mission is very slippery. And the way to keep vision and mission in front of people, and he speaks in a business context, but also in a church context, is to constantly be finding stories about people who are living out the vision and mission, constantly preaching it from the front, constantly talking about it in meetings and stuff. And so when you're talking about this intentional, and your second point of intentional recognition, this is kind of the idea that you're talking about, is this intentional recognition of people who are living out what you're trying to promote.
Yeah. I think probably one of the best illustrations I know of this is the church potluck. A lot of churches, years ago, they felt like we need to have a potluck every week. And I've noticed in more recent times, just before COVID, as I visit churches, many of them are doing only once a month. And you begin to ask them why. If fellowship is so important, really sitting and looking at the back of someone's head for 2 hours, an hour for Sabbath school, an hour for church, does not build relationships. Right. And so we say fellowship's so important. We know it's spiritual as well to fellowship, but we only do a fellowship meal once a month where we actually can interact over food and spend some time with others. What I've discovered is that people say we cut back because it's just a lot of hard work. And yet, if those very people that are doing that would happen to know that what you're doing has made a difference for this guest that showed up, they stayed by, and now they've decided to make this their church family because they felt so welcomed based on conversations they had during the fellowship meal. Right. When somebody knows that, just gets a word, man, your dish, I see you bring something nice every week, and your dish is usually the first one that's totally finished, Right. Thanks for what you're doing. It's making a difference. I know this is a lot of work. I know that it costs money. I know it takes time. Again, that's being very specific with individuals and affirming them, but it's amazing what that does to someone's energy level. We had some people that rolled out the red carpet for us when we got back from this trip from Latvia, and Laura Taylor made some muffins for my boy who has a gluten intolerance. So they're gluten-free, vegan, tasteless. No, they had great. Once you start removing all that stuff, right. I mean, they were amazing. And he started eating them and said, "Dad, I will work to earn money to pay for some more muffins. Right. How can I get some more of these?" Wow. When I mentioned that to Laura, it's like, I can make some more. Yeah. Because she knows that she did something that was valued, appreciated, and she was affirmed in it. Right. And so that energizes individuals, and we need to be doing a lot more of that in the church. I think we were too sparse with our affirmation of each other, and not that we created dependency on having to have it, because ultimately we're doing and serving God, not humans, in the sense of our worship. But it does help us to know that what we're doing is noticed and appreciated by others.
So communication is key in everything. Being able to communicate appreciation specifically. So what practical steps would you give a pastor or a leader in a church to that they could kind of have their antenna up to be noticing those things, so they can be intentional about communicating those things to people?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I did a couple things as a pastor to try to just have discipline in this area. One is I tried to make a practice of going around ahead of Sabbath school starting and maybe it's a different one each week, but just to say, look, I know you're really busy right now, but I do want to just have a quick prayer with you and just let you know how much I appreciate what you're doing leading out in this kids division. You don't want to have a 5-minute prayer because they're, getting, so you want that sensitivity there, but just to let them know that you notice what they're doing, that what they're doing is massively significant, investing in kids' lives. Another thing I tried to do is on Monday morning, I would think about everyone that was involved in worship, in leading in some way, or that I noticed doing something special. And sometimes I would send a handwritten card. Sometimes it could be an email, but it could be a text. People read those more than emails, right?
Right.
But just something to express appreciation for that individual's involvement over the Sabbath time. I would ask my elders, if I were pastoring now, to find any guest that is attending and come and personally introduce me to them. So, even if I get introduced 6 times to the same person by 6 different elders, they're going to think, this is an amazingly friendly church.
Yeah.
So, those are some very specific, but I'd make it a very, very tangible, disciplined approach, because until it becomes natural, there is a point in time where we become naturally affirming people.
Right.
But for most of us, it takes some discipline to get there.
So, dealing with that idea of communication as well, you talked about enthusiasm needed for guests to be excited. When you walk into a dark church and everybody's kind of somber, it's not always the most enthusiastic place. And as a guest, you're like, what's going on? So how can we build more excitement and enthusiasm in our churches to help church members kind of catch the vision or catch on to this idea of being enthusiastic about their worship, their connection with people?
Yeah. Do you have a sports team you're enthusiastic about?
Yes.
Okay, tell me more.
The Portland Trailblazers.
Okay. A local team, all right.
They're a local team, yeah. And just, it's I could talk about them quite a bit. I don't follow them as closely as I used to.
So who's your favorite player?
Well, past or present.
Okay, you have some past ones too.
Yeah, Clyde Drexler, I think, is definitely really one of my favorite players that ever played the game, and I really enjoyed watching him on the Trailblazers.
So when we attend sporting events, we see tons of enthusiasm for our team, right? And it's contagious, and that's why we like to go live events, because we can be part of the experience. I've attended a couple Dallas Cowboy games, and it's been a long season without much to be too excited about. But you're still excited when you see a good play or something spectacular happen. Yeah. And, and another illustration of this is that, you don't have to tell a grandparent, give them a seminar on how to be excited about being a grandparent. I've never seen such a seminar offered. Or a new parent. How do you get excited about being a new parent? Despite the sleepless nights, despite all the extra work, the enthusiasm's there, right? And so I think the lack of enthusiasm is something referred to in the Bible as Laodicea. And Scripture tells us with Laodicea that our response to that is to be zealous and repent. So we need to repent of the condition that we have allowed ourselves to get into spiritually. And I'll have another session that I'll be sharing about how to raise the level of spirituality in our lives. But I think if we're not having experience in ourselves, if we're not having something dynamic happening in our own lives, and that's why I think like divine appointments are so important, because it shows us that God's working in our life and in the lives of others. That adds fuel to our enthusiasm. And I have found a few occasions where what happens in church is a letdown from what's happening in someone's own individual spiritual life. But when you can match those two together, where you have the enthusiasm happening in a private spiritual life, an individual's life, and you can match that with what's happening in a church setting, it's an absolutely dynamic combination that can take place.
Yeah, that's good. Another question that came up with was resources. What if you're at a church and the resources are small? I know that when I saw the church that has that red tablecloth and they serve, and it's almost overwhelming to think of something like that. It's like, well, how would I'm in this church that have the resources to really be able to do that in that same way.
Yep.
So what do we do when we don't have the resources available to us for some of those bigger things? How can we be more simple about this red carpet service?
Sure. How many churches do you pastor?
I think you 3.
said it's 3, right? So are you preaching every Sabbath in those churches?
Not in each church every Sabbath, but I do preach every Sabbath.
So the question I have, and I'm not expecting you to answer this, is what is the quality of the sermons when you're not there? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a litmus test in one of what we're doing in terms of making sure we deliver what is excellent and what is well done. Because basically what that involves is mentoring and training. Mm-hmm. And if we put people into the pulpit that have no training in how to preach, they don't have a devotional life, they don't know how to land the plane. Mm-hmm. They preach from Genesis to Revelation, right, and you wonder what the point was. If we've not trained them, then that is a very simple, practical way to say, okay, we are making an effort to do things well, even though we have maybe a small church or a couple small churches. We've made sure that those that are getting the pulpit have been trained, and which means also that being self-critical and welcoming feedback, which is a hard thing to accept. Right. But there's some amazing lay preachers that outpreach most pastors, and but that's come through training and practice. And another way to do that is to get involved in a mission trip as a church, a preaching mission trip, and for people to see, hey, I'm preaching. People made a decision for Jesus and they were baptized. I'm excited about sharing this message, and so we need to light a fire with those that are preaching. That's a big segment of our worship service. And so training that we do in that area can have a huge impact immediately. Right. I hope that those that are leading music actually get together and practice before they get up to sing. Right. And whether that's Friday night. And one of the cool things about, we know how important small groups are, is you can actually have a praise team become a small group in the way they function. When they get together to practice, they say, hey, how's everybody's week going? Anything we need to pray together about? And they actually begin to care about each other's individuals, not just coming together because they have a, quote, task to do for church. So you can almost get a double benefit, a relational benefit out of that kind of thing as well. So I think one of the things we always have to keep in mind is capacity and pacing. What is the capacity of the team that we have? What are we able to take on and do well? And how soon can we add other areas? And so I know one pastor, he said that every person that's baptized is a new ministry. And so kind of took that approach. When somebody's joining our church, we're going to find a new place, a new opportunity. We're going to expand every time somebody new joins. And so that was the approach they took, and I thought that was quite effective.
Yeah. So basically it's just being intentional about the details. I mean, you're talking about how it's all about the details, just being intentional about the details and saying, what changes can we make now? What things can we do now that we can actually accomplish now, and not, have dreams out in the future, but looking at, we got to start somewhere, and starting in little things now can end up being some bigger things in the future. Yeah,
it's like turning. I think I don't know if I mentioned this one about announcements. Didn't catch it if I came through.
I didn't see it.
No, I think I took that one out. But there was because there's so many other good ones. Yeah. But there was a church that I remember our division president at the time visited the church, and there was no question that it's the best announcements in the North American division at that time. And basically they handed over to a couple people who had technical skills, and every week they pre-recorded in a very creative video the announcements, and they played it at the end of the worship service. And everybody wanted to stay by and see them because it was so fun, so creative, so informative. And they took something that normally is considered mundane and boring. Most people would say the announcements is the least favorite time of the worship experience. Right. And they took it and it became a highlight. So those are examples of things that can be done. And often you have maybe a couple teenagers that aren't doing much, that would just jump at an opportunity to say, hey, I'll get you the announcements, make it fun, make it amazing, and empower them to do it.
Good. Well, that's all the questions we have for this presentation, but I have really enjoyed this presentation and making me think more, and I'm sure our watchers, those watching, have been challenged as well. So thank you for
Thanks so
the
much.
presentation. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We have been blessed by Dr. Evans' presentation on red carpet service. Just want to let you know that tomorrow, starting at 5 p.m., Pronto Pups will be available on campus. And so if you're interested, you're more than welcome to come, starting at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. There's more coming later.